Okay, let's dive right in. If you're running a multi-brand fashion group, you know the feeling. The bigger you get, the more complex everything becomes. It feels like your operating models are just breaking under the weight of it all. This leads to inefficiency, sure, but even worse, a really disjointed experience for your customers. So today, we're going to explore a completely new way of thinking about this problem, something we're calling the transformation operating system. This quote, it absolutely nails the core issue. Scale multiplies complexity faster than operating models can evolve. See, it's not that your ambition is lacking, not at all. It's a structural problem. As you grow, as you add more brands and markets, the complexity just explodes, and your internal systems, they just can't keep up. The result is often strategic paralysis, where you know what you want to do, but you just can't seem to get it done. So that leads us to the million-dollar question, right? How do you actually grow without everything just breaking? This is the question on the mind of every C-suite executive in fashion right now. How do you stay agile and keep everything coherent when your portfolio is constantly expanding? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull that challenge apart and lay out a new framework that's all about sustainable growth. All right, section 1, the complexity paradox. Before we jump into the solution, we've got to really understand the problem. So let's take a closer look at exactly why the old ways of doing things, the traditional models, are just falling apart under all this pressure. It's not just one thing. It's a whole mix of pressures. You've got multiple brands, each with its own needs. You're in multiple markets, all with different rules. You're probably juggling multiple business models, from wholesale to direct-to-consumer. And on top of all that, you've got stakeholder expectations and these constantly shifting trade policies and tariffs. It's a compounding effect. All these things together create this perfect storm that just fragments your strategy and makes it nearly impossible to make good, clear decisions. So what do most companies do? They launch a big, flashy transformation program. But here's the fundamental flaw. These big projects almost always sit outside of how the business actually runs day to day. They're siloed, and because they're not integrated into the real work, they just don't create lasting change. They end up being these massive efforts that, honestly, rarely deliver on what they promised. Okay, let's dig a little deeper into why these transformations fail. It really comes down to what we call a disconnected value system. Let's actually visualize how this fragmentation plays out across the whole organization. And here it is, the core of the problem. You've got your departmental silos. The brand teams are laser focused on brand success. Makes sense. The retail teams are all about sell-through. Licensing is optimizing contracts. Digital is obsessed with its platforms. Look, in isolation, every single one of these departments is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But the result of all these separate efforts? The customer ends up with a fragmented, inconsistent, and frankly, confusing experience. This really drives home the point. These big transformation projects sit outside the day-to-day grind. So what happens? You pour a ton of money and effort into them, but because they're not actually woven into the fabric of your operating model, the value you create just evaporates. It never compounds. It's like the organization just hits the reset button every few years, throwing away all that hard-won knowledge and momentum. It's a massive cycle of waste. So we've diagnosed the problem. Now what's the solution? Well, it's all about a major shift in how we think, a true paradigm shift. We have to stop trying to fix individual parts in isolation and start thinking about optimizing the entire value system as a whole. For transformation to actually stick, you have to look at it from every angle. It's about connecting 4 key perspectives. First, you've got the brand, which needs creative integrity and, crucially, speed to market. Then there's the group level, which is all about portfolio visibility and getting that scalable leverage. Next is retail and distribution. They need demand accuracy and operational simplicity to function. And finally, and most importantly, there's the customer. They're the ones who need consistency, personalization, and trust. Real transformation only happens when you align all 4 of these needs at the same time. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it? How do you make this new way of thinking operational? The answer is to build what we call a transformation operating system. Think of it as a living platform that isn't a one-off project, but a permanent capability built right into the business. The foundation of this OS is something called the Modus ETP, or Enterprise Transformation Platform. This is the structural backbone. It maps out your end-to-end value chains and creates what we call a live operating model. This gives you governance and real execution control, but without all the red tape and bureaucracy that usually comes with it. Now, on top of that structural backbone, you layer the intelligence. That's the Modus ETI, or Enterprise Transformation Intelligence.
This is where AI comes in. This layer lets you do things like model different scenarios, simulate the impact of big decisions before you make them, and create these continuous feedback loops so the organization is always learning and optimizing.
And this brings us to an absolutely crucial point. AI by itself does not transform a fashion organization. It just doesn't. Your operating model is what transforms the business. The incredible power of AI is only unlocked when you embed it inside a smart, coherent business framework. So let's look at the difference here. The old way, you'd start with a shiny new AI tool, or a vendor, or maybe a small pilot project, and then you'd go looking for a problem to solve with it. The Modus way completely flips that on its head. You start with your operating model. You start with the most important decisions that need to be made. You start with the actual roles people have. Then you design AI to support and supercharge those things.
When you design AI into the operating model this way, it stops being some mysterious black box. It becomes a co-pilot for your people. It's anchored directly to your value chains. It's aligned with specific decision points. It's mapped to real roles to help real people make better decisions. And, super important, it's governed at the board level, with the same seriousness as any other core strategic asset. Okay, so we've talked about what this is and how it works. Now for the big finale. The payoff. Why go through all this trouble? What's the ultimate outcome when you embed this kind of transformation capability right into the heart of your organization? The payoff is that you create something we call transformation as usual. This is the holy grail. It's a state where change isn't some scary, disruptive, one-off event. Instead, it just becomes business as normal. It's part of your company's DNA. And the outcomes here are huge, and they compound over time. Your transformation efforts never have to reset to zero. All that institutional knowledge you build actually sticks around and grows. New brands can be onboarded way faster. Acquisitions integrate so much more cleanly. And maybe best of all, your strategy can finally move at the speed of the market, not the speed of your last painful reorg. Your whole operating model just evolves continuously. So what does this mean for the leadership team? Well, it all boils down to a few key things. First, confidence. You get a crystal clear line of sight all the way from your high-level strategy to how value is actually being created on the ground. Second, control. You get real governance without the soul-crushing bureaucracy. And third, better decisions. You can make faster, safer calls thanks to that AI-driven scenario modeling. And the big one, you build a sustainable engine for growth that you own, instead of constantly outsourcing it. At the end of the day, this is the new strategic imperative. The future really does belong to organizations that are designed to transform always. In a world that's changing this fast, it's not about being the biggest or even the fastest anymore. It's about being built to evolve. And that leaves us with one final, pretty critical question to think about. Is your organization built for that old model of episodic, painful change, or is it built for continuous compounding advantage? Because how you answer that question is really going to determine your competitive edge for the next decade.